Welcome to Healing Childhood Trauma for Millennial Women, the podcast where we deep dive into relationships, attachment, and healing from relational and childhood trauma. I'm Lizandra Leigertwood, your host, a psychotherapist and a relationship therapist who works with childhood trauma and high-functioning anxiety in adults. Over the last 14 years, I have been dedicated to helping women just like you to break unhealthy patterns of the past for generational and heart healing. On this podcast, we explore expert insights and practical tips that will empower you to transform your relationships and underlying anxiety from insecure to secure attachment. The first relationship we begin with is the one you have with you. Whether you're single, married, or somewhere in between, if you've experienced childhood trauma or spaces where you've never felt good enough and now you're ready to heal, grow, and build stronger connections, this podcast is for you. I use my personal experience as a therapist and someone who loves personal development and learning about what makes us tick. Join our community of resilient women who are committed to understanding their past, embracing their present, and creating a future filled with trust and love. This is where healing meets growth. So let's dive in and start this journey together. Welcome to Healing Childhood Trauma. Hello, and welcome to my podcast. I am very grateful that you have chosen to spend some of your time here with me today to listen to me and to be on this journey of growth and healing. So thank you. This podcast has literally been in the making since 2020, since the pandemic, when I got myself a podcast mic and recorded a few episodes because everybody was literally on this thing of podcasting. And, what else are we going to do in the middle of a pandemic when we're all stuck at home? Literally, it was so hard for me to even get this podcast mic because they were all selling out. Everybody was just on podcasting. And at the time, it seemed like a really good idea. And then I got to the editing process and I was like, oh my gosh, what is this? This is taking too long. And my patience and my lack of technology skills just couldn't be dealing with it. But it has been on my mind and in my heart for a long time. And in the last year, my friend, one of my closest friends, has been on me to start this process and to start imperfectly, because I have a little bit of perfectionism where if I don't do something to the best of my ability, then I don't really want to do it. So I am starting imperfectly just to get the ball rolling and to actually make some progress with this without worrying about the bells and whistles of learning everything about podcasting, because this is never going to be like my main thing. My main thing is therapy and the healing journey. And so if I can reach people who are interested in learning about healing and growth and self-development, then that's the main thing. And that's literally what I am here to do. So that's essentially why I've started this podcast. So if you've never had therapy before or you've been thinking about it, I feel like this is a good place to have an introduction to know what therapy is like without actually being in therapy. But as a caveat, I also have to say that this podcast is not a replacement for therapy. Yes, you will learn some insights and you will learn more about yourself and get to thinking about things in a different way. But I don't want you to substitute this as your only form of healing. As I said, this podcast is going to be imperfect. You might catch me swearing sometimes. It's going to be full of like practical insights, but also like real talk about real life situations and real shit, so that I'm not going to bullshit you and kind of, not hold you accountable for certain things and certain behaviors that we might do, certain toxic behaviors that we might do. But we are all going to do that with like laughs, compassion, and good vibes. So if that is a bit of you, then welcome. I hope you stay. I hope you enjoy the journey with me. I'm going to be recording this podcast probably in seasons as opposed to weekly, just to give myself some time to be able to create and not hold myself to any unrealistic expectations. So this is going to be season 1, and then we'll kind of assess and see how things have gone, and I'll get your feedback and see how you're enjoying the episodes and what you want to learn more about, and we will take things from there. So that's a little bit about me and a bit about my journey and why I started this time with you. But I also want you to get some value out of this episode as well. And since the point of this podcast is to reach more women to have better relationships with themselves, and to basically heal their attachment wounds from their childhood and things that's preventing them from showing up as their authentic selves, really just being on this growth journey. That's what I'm about. I'm always about learning more about myself, self-development and healing, and so that's what I want to share with you. So I'm going to tell you about where you can start on your own personal healing journey. And this can apply to you whether you've had therapy before, whether you're a seasoned person at therapy, or even if you've never had therapy before, you've been a little bit scared, a bit apprehensive because you don't want to almost unpick everything because you're worried that if you start unpicking one thing, everything's going to fall apart. What I will say is that generally that isn't what happens in therapy. The whole point is that we work with you, especially if you're working with somebody who is trauma informed. They will work with you so that you're doing that healing work in increments. So you're not just like ripping off the plaster and like revealing all your traumas and feeling overwhelmed. Okay, the point of trauma work is to be slow, steady, and to have that safety aspect. When it comes to starting on your own healing journey, one thing that I really want you to remember is to acknowledge that it is a journey and that there is literally no such thing as being fully healed. That's not necessarily what you want to hear, but that there is no such thing as being entirely, completely, fully healed, because life happens and things happen to us sometimes that's beyond our control. And while there's no such thing as being fully healed, there is definitely a point where you get to where you just feel better within yourself. You feel more self-assured. You feel more confident in who you are. You feel more regulated. You feel calmer. You feel more like your authentic self, like you really know who you are. And when you take on that idea of there's no destination necessarily that I need to get to, it kind of takes that pressure off of you so that you're not thinking that you have to spend the rest of your life constantly healing, because part of the healing journey is also about just fucking living your life and not being held back by, oh, I need to constantly be in therapy. You don't need to be in therapy for the rest of your life. You don't need to be in therapy all of the time. Like, it's okay to take pauses, to take breaks, to have setbacks. That's just the very realistic and honest view of what happens when you are actually on your healing journey. So step 2, I'm going to ask you the miracle question. And this question is based on solution-focused therapy. And this question first came up with me with my supervisor, who I think was actually my therapist at the time when I was training myself to be a therapist. And she always comes back to this question and it can be really powerful. So I love it. So that's what I'm going to share. And the miracle question is based on this. So imagine you wake up tomorrow and for some unknown reason, a miracle has happened and everything that you want to fix in your life miraculously is fixed. Everything in your life is exactly the way that you want it to be. You are the person who you want to be, and everything is your idea of perfect. Now, if you woke up and that happened without questioning about, why would this happen? Is it real? Is it going to end soon? We're not doing any of that. We're not doubting ourselves. We're not questioning the miracle. We're just going to allow ourselves to dream and imagine for a minute. And if this miracle has happened and everything is in your life the way you want it to be, what would that look like? how would you know that that miracle had happened? What would be different? What would be different about you? What would be different about your friends, your family? Would they see you differently? What would be your thoughts and feelings if your life was exactly the way you wanted it to be? When you give yourself that time to really think about it and even try writing it down, don't worry about if it sounds unrealistic, write it down anyway. Putting things on paper just puts things into perspective. It makes things so much clearer, and you're literally putting it into existence. So I would encourage you to write this down, because essentially what you're going to do is you're going to start making a plan to work towards that, because it doesn't have to be unrealistic. Even if you were to move 10% in that direction, it's still working towards something. And changing your mindset and focusing on not just the positive, because it's not just about positive thoughts and positive thinking. It's just about knowing that there's other possibilities for you. So make your plan and start working towards that as often as you can. What's really important about the healing journey is that you show yourself compassion. But if we can show ourselves compassion and grace, we can also show ourselves accountability in that. So you showing yourself compassion doesn't mean that you're giving yourself excuses. It just means that you're being more curious about certain behaviors or certain things that you might say or do, or certain ways that you might be within yourself or within your relationships. So if there is any one thing that you can take from this to start and be on your healing journey, I'm going to say it's going to be doing so with compassion. Because when you show yourself compassion, that's the only way that you can actually grow and have the kind of safety and the kind of nurturing space that you need in order to actually be able to grow, in order to thrive, and to not just be in your trauma response, and to feel safe. We will definitely cover more things about your healing journey, but I'm going to leave it there because I don't want this podcast or episodes to take too much time. I want it to be fairly digestible and short enough episodes where I'm not just chatting your ear off for, an hour at a time. So we're going to try and keep it short, sharp, focused. What I will do is I will also introduce guest speakers, other people who work within similar fields as I do. So perhaps other therapists and other people within my network who can also bring value to what we're learning and what we're talking about. But for now, thank you so much for listening, and I really hope that you follow up with more episodes, and I will speak to you very, very soon. Thank you for joining this episode of Healing Childhood Trauma. I hope you found today's discussion insightful and empowering. Remember, healing is a journey and you are not alone on this path. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favourite podcast platform. And you can share this episode with a friend. Your feedback helps this podcast to reach more women who are ready to heal and build secure, healthy relationships and heal from the past.